Education outcomes and health and well-being are linked through a complex range of factors such as income, access to healthcare and services, and employment. Educational outcomes are also linked to cognitive skills, choices, social networks, and other determinants of health, such as risky behavior. According to the Department of Health, there are 4 ways in which the association between education and health can be expressed. Firstly, the importance of socio-economic status, where educated children and young adults turn into adults with better jobs, higher socio-economic status, and better health. Secondly, educated people are associated with having better social psychological resources, or in other words, a better sense of control over one's life by having education, employment, and income. The third way in which education impacts health relates to practical skills, such as being able to better manage your health by accessing services and comprehending health messages. Lifestyle factors such as smoking, drinking excessively, and a lack of preventative care have been associated with poorer education. Finally, the education of an individual's parents impacts greatly on the health outcomes and development of their children. If an individual's education impacts on their health outcomes, the same works in reverse. An individual's health can impact on their ability to achieve their educational goals. Poor health can have a negative impact on education in a number of ways. University is a place where students are bound to feel the stress of deadlines, exams, and possibly juggling part-time work while maintaining healthy social habits. Students will most likely experience unexpected problems such as some sort of personal crisis, death in the family, illness, and/or financial hardship. Specifically, issues such as depression and anxiety, self-esteem, discrimination by peers, sleeping disorders, overweight and obesity, smoking, poor nutrition, alcohol consumption, and drug use have shown to have impacted negatively on educational outcomes. By making university a more safe and supportive environment, students can improve their health and their educational outcomes. This project is targeted at Indigenous students, a vulnerable group who are less likely to attend university and more prone to experiencing poor health. Over 500,000 Australians are identified as being Indigenous. Specifically, they comprise 2.2% of the population, but only 1.4% of student enrolments. There are also a small number of Indigenous staff at universities, with Indigenous staff members making up 0.8% of full-time academic staff and 1.2% of general university staff. Of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander university students in 2009, 63% re-enrolled compared to 79% of non-Indigenous students. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students also have lower completion rates over 5 years, with only 40% of Indigenous students completing their courses compared to 68% of non-Indigenous students. Given that there are small numbers of Indigenous people at university, especially students, as well as a high dropout rate and long completion times for their courses, it is important that we have a program that supports and encourages Indigenous students and embraces Indigenous culture. If Indigenous students experience higher dropout rates and longer course completion time, then we need to look at the issues as to why this is so. There are a number of barriers that affect Indigenous students, which can be divided into 4 main areas. The first being physical barriers, such as geographic location. If a student lives in a rural or remote location, they may need to move away from home, meaning they are distant from their support networks and may need support in adjusting to a new environment. The second being cultural barriers such as discrimination, social difficulties, or difficulty in adjusting to the university culture. The third barrier is economic. This refers to the cost of attending university and living expenses. The final barrier to be considered is informational, which is due to lower levels of literacy in Indigenous communities. By addressing these barriers, this project will be able to achieve its aim of making Indigenous students feel welcome, safe, and supported in a tertiary setting. The project will coincide with Harmony Day, which is a day that celebrates respect for different cultures of all Australians. Harmony Day also takes place on the 21st of March, which is about 3 weeks into the semester, which is an ideal time to promote health and ensure students feel safe and welcome at uni. Indigenous students of all years will be invited to participate in the creation of an artwork to be displayed somewhere in the grounds of Latrobe. This artwork will be in the form of wooden poles being inserted into the ground or a base similar to a totem pole. The students will then paint on the logs, drawing anything that they feel reflects them and their Indigenous heritage. By doing this, students will get a chance to meet other Indigenous students while celebrating themselves and their culture as active participants in the Latrobe community. It is a project that has the potential to become an ongoing event where new and old Indigenous students get together to collaborate and literally leave their mark on the university in a positive way. One of the advantages of this project is that it gives students an informal way to connect with other Indigenous students. The resources needed for this project include 4 large wooden poles or logs, paint, and a small amount of money for posters and promotion, the total cost of this being $500. To promote cultural competency, this project uses the National Best Practice Framework for Indigenous Cultural Competency in Australian Universities. This framework is used to embed cultural competencies in sustainable ways that support reconciliation and social justice in a university setting. There are 5 guiding principles to Indigenous cultural competency which this project will be using to deliver the intervention. Firstly, Indigenous people should be active in university management and governance. Secondly, all graduates should be culturally competent. The third principle refers to research being done in a culturally competent way to empower and enable students. The fourth principle refers to increasing Indigenous employment at university, and the final principle states that universities should work in partnership with Indigenous communities to help promote culturally competent practices within the wider community. By using this framework, it ensures that the project will empower and educate people in a way that is culturally appropriate. As we have established, education and health are extremely important. If a person is not educated, they are more likely to experience poorer health. If a person is not healthy, they are less likely to receive education. It then makes sense for universities to do their utmost to ensure an environment where students can be safe and feel supported in controlling the things that affect their health.